Over the long years of his reign, several major assassination attempts were made on Stalin, none of which led to the murder or even injury of the leader. His security and safety were at a very high level. It is worth noting that Stalin himself was terribly afraid of his death, and on this basis, towards the end of his life, he earned severe paranoia. He did not trust almost anyone. He was constantly playing it safe and suspecting many of conspiracies against himself. On November 16, 1931, Ogarov tried to shoot at Stalin, a white officer and a secret employee of the British intelligence, who worked along the line, Russian All-Military Union, and through the oil section of the Torkprom. He accidentally met Stalin on Olyinka Street and tried to grab a revolver. The employee of the OGPU, who followed him, prevented the attempt. As it became known recently in the early 1930s, a fairly real conspiracy was formed against Stalin with the participation of Anukidze, Peterson, the military, which was called the Blunker case. As part of this conspiracy, the arrest or murder of Stalin and his immediate environment was planned. All the main defendants who were in this case were shot. The case file has been largely classified to the present. In the literature, there are mentioned that in January 1935, a representative of the Count Orlov Pavlova shot in Stalin in the Kremlin library. Stalin was not injured, and the shooter was arrested and soon shot. The secret sabotage operation under the code name Bear was prepared with the participation of the head of the Far Eastern Department of the NKVD, Heinrich Samoilovich Lyushkov, who fled in 1938. The goal was set to destroy Stalin in one of his residences. 6 white guards from the Union of Russian Patriots were supposed to become the performers. In Matsist, Stalin took therapeutic baths, and during the procedures he was left in the room alone. Then they had to kill him. However, at the beginning of 1939, during the crossing of the Turkish-Soviet border near the village of Bort, machine gun fire was opened along the terrorist group, as a result of which the 3 were killed, the rest fled. Presumably, the plans of the terrorists were announced by the Soviet agent Leo, who worked in Manjo-Go. On November 6, 1942, Savely Dmitriev, hidden in the frontal place of Red Square, opened firing at a government car that left the Kremlin Spassky Gate. After he made several shots, the terrorist was neutralized by guard. No one was injured. It is believed that Dmitriev accepted Mikoyan's car for Stalin's car. According to existing versions, Dmitriev wanted to take revenge or he was mentally ill. For almost 8 years, Dmitriev spent in prisons of the NKVD, where they tried to find out the motives of the attempt. In the end of August 1950, a small note was placed in the central newspapers of the USSR. The terrorist Dmitriev was detained on Red Square. On August 25, 1950, according to the verdict of the Military Collegium of the Supreme Court of the USSR, he was shot. The true motives of this attempt and the results of the investigation are still unknown. However, individual details, which have fallen in print, testify that Dmitriev had encroached on Stalin. In 1943, Germany developed an operation to eliminate Stalin, Roosevelt and Churchill during the Tehran Conference, held in November 1943. However, Soviet intelligence was informed of the prepared attempt from several sources and tore off German intelligence plans. Pavel Sudoplatov wrote, Medvedev and Kuznetsov found that Skorzin was preparing a group of attacks on the American and Soviet embassies in Tehran, where in 1943 the first Big Three conference was supposed to be held. A group of militants Skorzeny underwent training near Vinnytsia, where the partisan detachment of Medvedev acted. Kuznetsov established friendly relations with the officer of the German Special Services Oster. Having owed Kuznetsov, Oster suggested paying with him by Iranian carpets, which he was going to bring to Vinnytsia from a business trip to Tehran. This message, immediately transferred to Moscow, coincided with information from other sources and helped us prevent shares in Tehran against the Big Three. Nikolai Kuznetsov was a personnel employee of Soviet intelligence and began serving in it back in 1938. Its purely Aryan appearance, the amazing ability to transform, the brilliant knowledge of the German language in Germany could not go unnoticed. He was prepared for a long time and abandoned the rear to the Germans only in 1942. Kuznetsov perfectly played the role of Lieutenant Wehrmacht Paul Zibbert. The organization, Zeppelin, is the reconnaissance sabotage body of Nazi Germany, created in March 1942 in the structure of the V Directorate, SD as shotgun, to work in the Soviet rear. The most famous of his operation is an attempt to kill Stalin in 1944. The attempt was prepared using prisoner of war Peter Ivanovich Shiloh, German pseudonym Tavrin, Politz. The Germans prepared the operation very carefully. Politov made several sets of Soviet documents, of which the main was the certificate in the name of the head of the Smersh department of the 39th Army, Major Tavrin. His appearance in Moscow was explained by the vacation after injury and treatment in the hospital. To simulate the heated injuries, experienced German surgeons performed plastic surgery, several incisions and former seams. Tavrin was equipped with Soviet awards, from which, they believed, the main Order of Lenin and the Golden Star Medal, executed in captivity of the Guard Major General Shepetov. The details such as the copies of the newspapers, Pravda, and Izvestia, in which essays on exploits, decrees on awarding and a portrait of the heroic Major Tavrin, were also provided. The script of the attack, according to investigators, suggested the following. Tavrin with the documents of the Major, Smersha, hero of the Soviet Union, a disabled warrior penetrates the territory of Moscow, is justified there in a private apartment, is associated with the heads of the anti-Soviet organization, Union of Russian Officers, by General Zagladin from the Department of the People's Commissariat of Defense and Major Palkin from the headquarters of the Reserve Officer Regiment. Together, they are looking for the possibility of Tavrin's penetration at a solemn meeting in the Kremlin, which was present at Stalin. There, the agent had to shoot at the leader with a poisoned bullet. The death of Stalin would be, as expected, a signal for the landing on the outskirts of Moscow of a large landing, which would capture the demoralized Kremlin and put the Russian cabinet in power, led by General Vlasov. In case Tavrin failed to get into the Kremlin, he had to ambush a car with Stalin and blow it up with a device, Armor 9, capable of piercing armor 45 mm thick, which was a 30 mm short-barreled recoilless cannon. A few weeks before the transfer of Tavrin across the front line, he was twice, as follows from the materials, personally instructed by General Vlasov and 3 times by the famous fascist saboteur Otto Skorzeny. From the very beginning, it was assumed that Tavrin should carry out the operation alone. But at the end of 1943, in Pskov, where the headquarters of the Zeppelin was located, he met his future wife, Lydia Shilova, and this circumstance made adjustments to the scenario of the operation. Lydia worked as an accountant. They got married 2 weeks later. After the wedding, Tavrin and his wife were sent to Riga, where he was admitted to the hospital. Tavrin's wife received the name Agent Adamchuk. By the spring of 1944, the preparation of Tavrin was completed. Subsequently, during the investigation, it was established that Lydia was completely unaware of the terrorist assignment of Tavrin and was sure that he was not going to work for the Germans on Soviet territory. Tavrin and his accomplice Shilova, after being transferred to the USSR, were quickly arrested by counterintelligence agencies, and the assassination plans failed. There are many versions explaining some of the unusual circumstances of Stalin's death. It is often claimed that someone from his inner circle helped Stalin to die. However, it is only known for certain that when Stalin had a stroke on March 1st, the guards did not come to his aid for several hours. The doctors were subsequently called also with a great delay, since the guards asked for the sanction of the members of the Presidium of the Central Committee of the CPSU, who were part of the narrow leadership. This is where our video ends. Friends, I will be very grateful if you just like, write a comment and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for being with us.